We got John Alite, a.k.a. John Alite, a.k.a. the Butcher from Woodhaven, the Albanian nightmare himself. John, thank you for coming through today, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I haven't been out in LA in a lot of years. So.
How was the flight in from NY?
Yeah, it was all right. I'm not a big airplane guy. I don't like flying too much, but it was a good flight.
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass now with the masks and the whole thing. But we thank you for coming through, John, and you've got a remarkable story, and a lot of people can't even relate to the life that you've lived, man. And it all started in Woodhaven, Queens, right? And tell us about growing up in the neighborhood.
Well, I grew up on Jamaica Avenue, so it was it was a blue-collar neighborhood, a lot of poverty in the area. I grew up during the years of, there was a lot of racism at the time. They just started busing in kids from other neighborhoods, so there was a lot of conflicts, streets, nonsense as kids. So you just kind of used to growing up and seeing a lot of guys getting hurt, killed, stabbed, shot. And it was just part of a normal living for, where we grew up, all of us.
Right. And would you say most of the neighborhood was Italian, Albanians, a lot of white ethnicities?
You had a lot of white ethnicities. You had a lot of Irish. You had a lot of Spanish in those days, Puerto Rican. On the other side of each side of the neighborhood was black. And you had Italians, obviously, also. But you didn't have that many Albanians in those days because Albania was a closed-off country. Back in those years, it was a communist country. You couldn't get out. Now, people didn't really even know what Albania was. Now everybody knows it because they're a force to be reckoned with around the world in every neighborhood, every street. Albania's got a tough culture.
Yeah, no, definitely so. And were most of your friends growing up Italian, Sicilians?
Yeah, a lot of Italians. The American Italians a little different than the European Italians. They don't really understand the culture, the American Italians here. They don't go into Europe the way I do. And, my family, we're back there every year, for a couple of months at a time. So the Americans actually, a lot of these guys can't speak a lick of Italian and don't really understand. They really don't understand the European ways.
Yeah.
European ways.
What do you think? Like Italians think of like New York Italians? Do they think they're kind of cavones, or like what do they look at kind of Italian culture here in America as?
I just had an Italian guy from Sicily on my show, and it was a great show, my podcast, and we joked and laughed, and he was talking about how they don't even know anything about, Italy and the culture and, nothing about the family structure, the mob structure. They really don't know, and I know this too because they don't leave their neighborhoods. These guys don't really understand anything outside their 4 blocks that they live in.
Right, and you've had that introduction to overseas, and you always fanned out of your neighborhood, but coming up, you were really groomed to be a part of the LCN and that whole world. How did that introduction, like 16 years old, were you starting to run with the fellas, or?
Nah, I mean, I grew up at like 3 and 4 years old around like Lucky Luciano's cousin Charlie, who was a made guy with the Gambino family, one of my father's partners. My father was a gambler, not a gangster, and Charlie was a gangster, obviously. He came from royalty in that life. These guys grew up in North Jersey and then my father grew up in Rivington, Delancey, down in Manhattan. So he grew up in the hub of gangsters with Vito Genovese and these guys. And so I was accustomed being around them since I'm a baby. And then later on again, with the boss of our family in our neighborhood was Anthony Ruggiano's father, Fat Andy Ruggiano, who was the boss. So I grew up on
Wasn't he
his
your
house.
baseball coach?
Yeah, the baseball coach, the Sons, and boxing. And so I grew up with the man who was, his father was, Fat Andy was made by Albert Anastasia in 1954, Murder Inc. He was a serious gangster, and that's who I was raised around, him.
And I assume all the youngsters, they looked up to these guys like they were gods in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, that was our the role models for us were these guys, and the way they dressed, the way they talked, the way they acted. So unfortunately, as a kid, that's what you wanted to be like.
Right.
And I say unfortunately.
Yeah, and John, you seem like a guy who wanted to stand out of the crowd and go. You were willing to go that extra mile in terms of violence When did you start getting really violent? At what age would you say you started to turn it up?
I was always fighting because we were brought up that way. I was a small kid. I was never intimidating to anybody. So the only way you would get respect is to be able to handle yourself and hurt them. So I think around 14, I started getting a little more violent with weapons.
Right. And when did you start toting a pistola? At what age?
First time I think I carried or played around with a gun was probably 16 or 17. They didn't use it at that time, but I started bringing it around with the idea of wanting to use it, unfortunately, again.
And it's well known that you eventually became an enforcer for the Gambino family, more specifically under the Gotti regime. And did they look at you as a useful tool? Because you could never be made as an Albanian, but you could be more ruthless to them on the fringe. Is that how they looked at you when they were grooming you?
Yeah, I mean, they looked at me knowing that I would do whatever they asked. They knew that I would blindly be loyal, and they knew I'd be violent. And they used guys like Jimmy Burke from our neighborhood that was looked at as a boss, and nobody was going to tell him he wasn't made. Joe Watts is some of the names these guys bring up, and you got guys like Bugsy Siegel, so none of these guys are Italian, but they were treated like bosses. They were respected, because listen, let's face it, when someone's violent, they're afraid of you, and when they're afraid of you, make money. And so I used to say my face is my wallet, and I made sure that it was very violent. I wanted everybody to understand that if I came around, it was going to be for something serious.
But you earned your respect on the streets, and it earned so much respect that you were almost put in a position to be the watchful eye of John Gotti Jr., right?
Yeah, I mean, the father was a smart gangster. He understood to keep him surrounded by some serious guys. So he had, myself, Bobby Borriello around him, who later on gets killed. But this is a known shooter, tough guy, who was involved in the wars early on, back in the days, the Gallo, wars. And so he's shot up. His brother was shot up. These guys were serious gangsters. And so if somebody sees us with the son, they think the son's capable in that position.
Sure. So you lended some credibility, some muscle. You were basically in a position to be the muscle of John Jr. per the direction of Senior, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're not going to get away with selling drugs and hurting people and shooting people the way I did without the okay of the father, or you'll be just another guy that's found on the street dead.
Right. And just to be around the proximity of Senior and Junior meant you were a major somebody.
Yeah, I mean, listen, in those days, Gotti was the name in the neighborhood once Fat Andy went to prison. And, he had a reputation of having some killers around him. And, they groomed me to be the same, to come up and be that name, the face of that family. Is really what it is.
Did you remember seeing Sammy the Bull Gravano around?
Yeah, I seen Sammy early on. I wasn't friendly with him. He would come around, he was very quiet. He didn't say too much. And unless you have business with him, you're not really talking to him. You say hello. There's a pecking order, and when we walk into the club, if John's there, you don't say hello to anybody else. You kiss John first, and then you go to the other guys. And most of the guys because we're at the club day and night together, so everybody knows each other. You give them a handshake, a kiss on the cheek, and you keep it moving.
John, you were known as an absolute tough guy, an enforcer. Were you able to kind of leverage the Gotti name to advantage personally and do some of your own business? Was that a name you'd throw around and you'd work your own deals on the side?
I mean, we're always making money, but you don't throw the name around, especially in those days. The modern day mob, everybody wants to say who they are. In those days, that's a fast way of getting yourself killed. But you don't need to say anything because you're walking around the street, you're in front of the club, people are driving by, they see you, word of mouth, everybody knows who you are, you're hurting guys. So the word spreads, they know who you are. They know what family you're around. It's a small knit group of people in the mob, really.
And being street muscle, you were able to use your mind as well and start really earning dollars. Tell us some of the schemes and scams that you were involved in during that build-up process.
Listen, we're all in the drug business. We're in loan shark business. We're all bookmakers. extortion, money laundering. So we're involved in union shakedowns. You're involved in only every aspect, counterfeit money. If you think about it, we've done it all. You know, there's nothing you leave out. If there's money on the table, we're going to go get it. Kennedy Airport was a playground for trucks. We'd be heisting trucks. You know, some of them would give me ups, and some of them that we would take them.
Right. And you were known for jacking drug dealers.
I jacked a lot of drug dealers on, some of them on my own, without the family, the Gottis, or anybody else, and some of them with them. But, you know, everything's run like a business. It's not run where people think that you run around the street just robbing drug dealers. They're usually warned, do business with us or don't do no business. Buy from us. If you got a better price than us, we'll buy from you at our price that we're going to tell you, basically. You're going to control the situation. Guys that didn't want to go along with the program, yeah, we'd rob them.
But before you jack a drug dealer, would you do some background investigation, make sure they're not hooked up with another fella?
Yeah, we basically know who's who, same thing. I mean, unless it's somebody we really don't know, we'll find out. We'll ask somebody, who's this guy? Is he around anybody? What is he doing? But, you know, you're not supposed to be in the drug business in our life. But everybody's in the drug business.
Right.
So even if you rob them, you might have a problem if they're around the wrong guy. But I got to tell you the truth, in those days, we didn't care.
Right. And did you run into a situation where a guy said, hey, John, I'm hooked up with so-and-so, and you'd run that back through the channel, and he may not be protected by that guy or on record with that guy? Did you run into that situation sometimes?
There was a club in Bayside called Northern Lights and Avantis. And it was a guy from Italy, the other side, and he pretended that he was a made guy. People never really verified. He was throwing names around. We went to the place, we started shaking him down. And, you know, then after we found out that he wasn't around, we did some homework. And I guess they're naive, they think you're not gonna check. And we threw him out of the place. And we ended up taking over the club. So both clubs. Instead of just being a weekly shakedown, it became he's out and we split the incomes that were coming in. So.
When did you start going down to South Florida? When did that start? Like, at what age were you doing that around?
I went down to South Florida originally around 17. I was playing baseball. I got a scholarship down there. And then I started maneuvering down there by my early 20s. And I was friendly with some people like the Scaglionis, who were Cigar City people. They wrote books about them. He was a made guy, Nick Scaglione, with the Gambino family, very good friends with Roy DeMeo. His grandson was my partner. So his grandson stayed partners with me up until this case, and we still stayed friendly until the last couple of years. We don't really see each other much.
What was Florida like? Was it wide open to mob guys, or did certain families have certain areas carved out? How did it really work?
You know, all the families work together. It's not what people think. You know, if you're making money together, you try not to step on toes, or, you know, then here comes the sit downs, and if that doesn't work, depending on what the boss says coming up, if it's going to change to something violent. But you try to avoid the violence as much as you can, because you're trying to, you know, everybody's trying to make money and do it together, whether you're the same family or not.
Right. And as a violent guy, and you were running and gunning out there, did anyone have to sit down on your behalf to clear something up that you've done? Did you step on toes while you were ripping and riding down there?
Listen, I was warned almost every week by Gotti, saying, I'm going to kill you if you shoot another guy, hurt another guy. But he would laugh, but he would yell at the same time. You know, behind that, I would say to certain guys, he's going to end up fucking killing me. And, you know, they would laugh, and they say, I ain't going to kill you. So, you know, when you're on his team, I got to say one thing about Gotti. Unless you do something terribly wrong to him, he did protect you. He did take care of you. I stabbed a guy in Fort Lauderdale in the throat. And, I mean, I probably would have got a good 30 years or 20 years back in those days. I got pinched right at the scene in Pompano. And I stabbed two guys, but one guy real bad.
Was that the bouncer that grabs you by the tie?
Yeah,
and you said, hey, just wait right here 1 second, and you went and got a butcher knife in the kitchen?
Yeah, basically that's what happened. I mean, he grabbed me, I warned him, he did it again when I walked back, and I put a knife through his neck. And Gotti's, my lawyer was Richie Raybach, that Gotti Sr. gave me, was his lawyer. And Richie talked to the attorney, and the other attorney realized that he was Gotti's attorney. He says, hey, is this guy one of Gotti's guys? And he says, yeah. So all of a sudden, the one guy was testifying on my behalf against his friend. And then the other guy said, I don't want no part of this. He was warned, if you go testify, that you're lucky you survived the stabbing. You just go about your business.
Just go about your business, right? John, you were doing really good business with parking lots. Do you do you wish you still had those? I mean, would those just be revenue cash cows right now?
I mean, I had parking lots, I had valet lots, I had self-parking garages.
It's a great business.
Oh, it's a cash business, 24 hours a day, you're making money while you're sleeping. So, I developed the business up to about 17.5 million a year. And when my case, what happened with my case, the guys that were working with me, wearing wires, set me up, and they ended up testifying against me, and I lost the business.
What was that case, John? Was that a
I
murder?
was out of Tampa, Florida. It was a RICO case that started the ball rolling on all these. I had 2 RICO cases at the time, and that was one of them, the one I took off on the run.
And you went on the run to avoid, obviously, being caught, but you wanted to see how things were shaking out back home, right?
True. You go on the run, and your mindset is, well, maybe I would be gone 3-5 years. You're going to start thinking about, let's see who's ratting. Let's see who can get killed here. Let's see who's going to get pinched, and see if it can slowly dissolve the case through intimidation, through violence, through money, whatever means you can get, and try to solve it. Well, that didn't happen.
And you dipped down to South America, right?
I dipped in 20 countries. I was originally in Colombia. I lived in Barranquilla. I lived in Cartagena, Santa Marta. I Medellin a little bit. I go back and forth. San Andreas. So,
right. And what did all the Latino folks think about this Albanian? Why is this Albanian guy here with a New York accent? Like, who did they kind of wonder who you were?
Yeah, they wondered. But I used to go to Billy's Gym. It was on 31st Street in Barranquilla. So I used to fight. So they thought I was down there fighting. They thought it was just hanging around, just vacation, and I liked it, and I stayed, and I was boxing, and so I use that as a cover story because I was always in the gyms.
Right, and you say you like to fight. Were you into MMA, jiu-jitsu, or just straight boxing?
No, straight boxing.
Yeah.
I actually didn't really understand the jiu-jitsu business. As when we were younger, it wasn't big. The Gracies were, but no, we're really now it became hugely popular. I got a lot of respect for the sport. There's some real tough guys in it, and it's a unique style of fighting, really.
Right.
In our day, it was wrestling and boxing. You didn't have this other stuff.
Right. No, I hear that. And so as you Interpol finally catches up to you in Brazil, right?
I was in Cuba and Africa and Venezuela on an army base, and I hit about 20 countries, Jamaica, Cayman Islands, and they finally catch me in Brazil.
And when they rolled up on you, were you like, fuck, I'm washed up, I'm done here?
Well, they rolled up on me with an army. They rolled up on me with a fast armored truck, helicopter, snipers, army blocked off each direction, machine guns. Interpol was another, whatever they brought, 4 or 6 guys.
And now you're in a Brazilian pen, which is the most filthiest place you could be in, right?
Yeah, I ended up I was the first person in that country ever sentenced and without being sentenced or charged with a crime in their country, sent to their penitentiaries.
And you mentioned that it was like you could bring knives, and just there was no law and order inside there, so the inmates ran the show.
No, for the people that are Brazilian, they understand those jails. It's nothing like we would ever see in this country. I mean, these jails are like concentration camps. They're probably the worst prisons in mostly any country. So it's just a disaster of a way to survive there.
So you're surviving this hellhole, and are you getting any intel from what's going on back in New York with your case? Do you have anybody sending you kites saying, John, stay down there, or hey man, there's people are rolling on you up here?
Well, you had the whole regime of Gotti's crew, his top right-hand men, captains, Mikey Scars, and all his buddies. They were all made guys in the Gambino film. They were all ratting. So they were all rolling one after another, and then eventually, while I'm in those penitentiaries, Gotti goes and he starts talking with the feds. So,
And you're talking about Junior, right?
Junior, yeah.
So once you heard word that he's proffering with the feds, you said, oh shit, I better, they're dumping everything on you basically. Is that what was happening? Oh, John Alite did it. John Alite did it.
Well, if anybody gets the paperwork, they'll see that that's what they did. Dozens of guys were saying John Alite did it. Ronnie one of them, Captain Gotti's guy, not my guy, he's Gotti's guy. He was known as my partner or whatever in some circles. And he did an opening statement saying that I'm Gotti's partner and in the drug business. He said it 12 or 14 times. And he said that I was dangerous and I would kill him if he wasn't nice to me. So these are the statements these guys are making against me. Made guys, and while I'm sitting in a penitentiary in Brazil, they're throwing me under the bus.
So when you caught wind of that, you said, shit, I'm not going to be the fall guy for this whole thing.
Well, actually, no, I still stood and fought it. I was fighting extradition. I stood in those penitentiaries, and I still wasn't giving in. And an attorney spoke to me about, Gotti. And one of the things that really haven't come out is when you're in the Bureau of Prisons, in federal time or a state, the BOP is who controls who comes in, where you go, if you're in the hole, if you're out of the hole. It has nothing to do with the FBI. And if you get transferred, it's by the marshals. So in 1998, when Gotti Jr. goes to see his father, and he has the FBI sitting in the room, the father flipped. Because the father understood, what is the FBI doing here? They have nothing to do with the prison system. So in 1998, prior to 2005, when he was ratting and sitting down at the briefing, he already was talking to the FBI. He wouldn't have had them in the room. They have no business there. Unless you're going to talk and the father refused and want to throw him out. But everybody misses that. And so,
were you trying to send kites to Gotti Jr. and say, hey man, hold your mud up there because I'm not folding down here? Did you try to reach out to
we did reach out through mutual friends and
through attorneys?
Attorneys and friends, and saying, I'm holding it down here. I left my family, I left my money. As much as whatever we had with each other, not liking each other, had nothing to do with the code that we believed in. And me as an Albanian, I believed in that code more than they did, because I ran. These guys just flipped. So it showed what their loyalty to that life was, as Italians.
And at that point, it completely turned you off to the whole fucking thing. You were like, why am I sitting here holding my mud when everybody's rolling on me? And that's when you basically popped back in and said, hey, you want to hear the story? Is that how it went down?
Basically, where I was getting turned down by other families. In those days, the whole Colombo family flipped. Then Joe Messina, the boss of the Bonanno family, he wore a wire, and his 14 captains, they all flipped. And then you had my family, the Gambino family, Sammy Gravano's ratting, Junior's meeting the feds. All his guys, Scars, all the captains, Ronnie won them, they're all flipped. They're all giving bad statements. So yeah, I'm up sitting as an Albanian saying, I'm loyal to this thing. These guys ain't loyal to their own thing. This has nothing to do with me now. It has to do with the structure of the mob. Why isn't any of these families taking care of what's going on between all these guys just flipping everywhere? And they're snitching. So I'm saying I've been loyal to something that does not exist.
You bought into the bill of goods, and then when the whole thing cratered and the Rico stuff and the big football numbers, the whole game was over, right? When you have a boss like Messina flipping, it's over. The game's over.
He wasn't. He's nothing special in the structure of the mafia of guys that are flipping. The problem is, in my opinion, is these guys are put in positions by nepotism. They're not there because they earned it, and this is why you got soft guys.
So I know this frustrated you during your whole time in the LCN. You're like, wait a second, I'm not Italian, so I'll never get my button, right? But I'm putting in more work than any of these guys. I'm the guy, I'm the muscle. What do I need them for? And what did that guy do to earn it? They say nepotism is okay as long as you keep it in the family, no pun intended. And that's what you were seeing, a bunch of guys that were soft, that were generation 2, that were kind of soft, and you're going, why am I risking my dome for this guy when I'm putting in all the work? Is that fair to say, John?
Yeah, I mean, how I looked at it like this. I'm out making millions. I own an estate, 15 acres in South Jersey, now it's worth about 10 million. So I have a beautiful property as a young guy. I'm making money, I'm traveling. And nobody, made guys or any other boss, would say anything to me because of the violence and because I was near Gotti Sr. Gotti Sr. carried, obviously, a lot of weight. Whether people liked him or loved him, they still feared him. And I was his guy. And I'm making this kind of money, and I'm getting the respect. Nobody would come up to me. They gave me respect as if I am a captain, I am a mate, I am a boss. And so obviously when guys like Ronnie Warnham are talking and they're saying he's Gotti's partner, he's this, he's that, I'm a captain, it resonated the same thing in the streets. Everybody knew what position I held in the street. So they started saying, oh, this guy's a street boss that, I don't know if, they come up with these terminologies.
John, when you were living in your compound, they sent a hit team through to pretty much knock you off. There was, 4 or 5 dudes that were sent to your estate. And who do you think made that call to send those fellas over there?
Yeah, one of the things when you're hurting guys all over and you're killing guys and shooting guys and your friends are getting killed, you're really not sure. I believed at that time it came from Tommy Karate for a lot of reasons. These guys were Mexican. He was doing a lot of business out of Mexico. Prior to that, my friend got pinched in Mexico with a guy, Paul Silvers, Greg Ryder, and a couple other guys, and Dennis Harrigan, who ends up later on getting killed. So I thought it came from there. And
were you able to go after Tommy Karate?
I tried to go after him. We robbed him. With the detective that worked with me, murdered with me, sold drugs with me, Phil Baroni. Another guy, Keith Pellegrino, that was the driver. He waited a couple blocks away. So, when you're in that life, you don't care what anybody's name or title is. If you're going to rob them, kill them, that's what you do.
Yeah. When you were locked up in federal prison here in the States, did you ever bump into Tommy Karate?
No, Tommy's in a penitentiary. I was in a penitentiary in Brazil.
Okay.
Until I came back.
And when you came back, you were under witness protection?
No, actually I refused. And, so that's part of the fallacy that goes out on the street. When I came back, I was in regular joints. I refused to go into any witness protection. I said, these guys ratted on me. Why would I go in witness protection? Let them. And then, the same thing with the guys that aren't doing anything. Listen, I'm not a Gotti. My name's Johnny the Albanian, Alite. So when these guys allow somebody to sit down with the feds and say, well, we're going to just shelf him and chase him. We're not going to kill him anymore. We decided this to me is why you lost the structure, because you're allowing guys to go on the street, rat, and stay in the areas, and these guys justify not doing work because they don't want to put work in themselves.
Right. And it doesn't seem anybody wants any smoke with you today. I mean, you walk the same neighborhood. You go to didn't you own a pizzeria in the neighborhood?
Yeah, I owned a pizzeria, yeah. So, I'm there every day. I'm drinking coffee every day. I have a ton of friends. I mean, I'm out of that life. This is not what I do anymore. I work with kids and organizations all over. But you have guys, again, like Sammy Gravano. He tells a good story because nobody asks him specifically, Sammy, you got 19 murders. You only shot that gun once. You killed one guy. You didn't go out there. You weren't busy with a gun. You might have had some guys around you.
Yeah.
But that doesn't impress me. Again, it's nepotism. How did he get to that position?
Yeah.
Let's find out, because we know he didn't do any robberies or anything of any significance because he talks about all that nonsense.
John, I never understood the beef with you and Gravano, Sammy the Bull. It never made sense to me because you guys are from the same brigada. When he was fresh out, you shot him some paper and gave him a little welcome package, and he's on record saying you were the perfect gangster, you were, really about that life, and you were LCN to the bone. What's the beef, man? Explain this to us.
The problem with these guys are, I call them out because when you're nice to them, they're used to the jerk-offs that are around them that they can talk down to and abuse. So they'll have dummies that'll run around for them, and they never know how to talk to a certain guy one way and another. They're too stupid. So he tried to step it up like he was telling me. We got to an argument. And then I just said to him, listen, you're a jerk-off. You con at other people. No one's ever, like if he was on your show, I'll give you 20 questions to ask the guy. You're a fraud. You used the gun once. You had a couple of guys around you would get them to do work for you. But when it comes down to it, you ain't doing shit without having 30 guys with you. That's why you're hiding. They're not staying here. Like when he says, I'm a gangster to the end. When you're a fucking gangster. You ratted on everybody that you could. You went, you hid. You didn't do the work you claimed that you did. You didn't even do any heists, no robberies, no scores, nothing. Yeah. You're not about nothing.
But John, do you blame him for ratting? Because when the feds played the tape and said, John Gotti's throwing you under the wheels, he kind of was in the same predicament you were in where, hey, if you're rolling on me, I'm coming in too, man. And I'm not going to be the whipping post for the whole family.
Listen, the thing is, if he's going to do that, he's going to rat, then stop saying you're gangster to the end. You're not a gangster to the end. you aren't a gangster from the start. So the problem is whether he agrees on that or people are going to go back and forth. I'm nobody to judge as far as what the two of them did. You know what? But I know what John thought about him. You know, he could change it. And his days were numbered. John was going to eventually kill him. And John made that very clear to me in different ways.
Yeah. And John, you and I have a mutual acquaintance that lives out here. He used to run with you. We're not going to mention any names.
He's a tough guy.
He's a tough kid. He was doing the Joker poker. It's all that stuff. But put that aside for a second. He told me you were not to be played with. You really were about that life. There's no embellishment here. And some people have thrown spears at you saying, oh, John wasn't that close to senior. You know, he was, you know, why do you think you're getting so many shots fired at you online in the mob tube sphere? What's the bone these guys have to pick with you? I mean,
because I could call them all out. I know none of them did work. None of them. They're all full of shit. They're jealous, and you know listen. You're gonna have fanboys. They can play on a computer now, make up anything they want. They know I'm not gonna go after them anymore. I got a different life. But facts of the history of what happened. There's too many guys like our friend, who was a legitimate tough guy. He might not have been a killer, but he was tough with his hands. He was. You know, he'd go do scores, he did a lot of things.
Right.
And, you know, there's too many of these guys that are out there that really know the facts that grew up with us. But not just guys like them, guys like Ronnie, one of them. You're a captain, why would you make that statement? Why would you make that statement in front of a judge in a courtroom 20 times if I'm not that guy? He would just leave that part out and say he's his drug dealer and he's partners with Gotti. So when these guys are making these comments and these statements against me, there's no reason for them to make them unless, obviously, it's accurate for who I was out there.
Right. I mean, it's well known, man. And, you know, you mentioned, you know, specific dates, times, locations where, you know, the gunplay occurred, and you show that. And, again, we're not glorifying it, but we're also saying, listen, John was with the business. John Alite was really with the business. And it's well known, so I don't understand now. It's just that whole world has become a swamp pool. That just the YouTube mob thing has become such a swamp of different factions and people. And
well, because if you can have them sitting here with us and talk, you know, when a guy gets in a ring, they're in a ring. They can't talk that nonsense. They got to perform. These are people hiding behind computers that weren't in the life. They weren't involved in the life. You have people's daughters that don't know shit about the life, that are out there talking. It's not like they sat in the rooms and had conversations. They don't know what the fuck went on. So, you know, these are nonsense people trying to get attention for whatever they're trying to do. You know, I got a lot of, you know, I'm out there. You know, I do a lot of work. I'm on movies, I'm in books, I'm in TV, so people are jealous, I guess. And then I don't live that life. It's sad. That life's a sad existence. There's three things that happen in that life. You go to jail for life, you get killed in the street, or you become an addicted person with drugs or whatever is going on. Those are the three things. There's nothing good comes out of that life. And if anybody tells you that, so I'm an advocate against life, so maybe you're going to get all these fanboys talking nonsense that never did anything. They play G.I. Joe on a computer, or they play that other game with their shooting on a computer, and they start buying into their own bullshit. But I can march in every guy through this door, and these guys never pulled a pistol in their life. Forget about a fist fight.
And John, you know, the one thing I have to respect about you, and I don't care, your critics have to respect this about you, that you give back to so many second chance programs, you speak to so many kids, and you're speaking from a perspective that, hey, you don't have to be a product of your zip code. And I asked you, if you didn't grow up in Woodhaven in that era under that pretense, what would have life looked for you? Would you have been a ball player? Would you have been a doctor? What your circumstances would have changed, correct?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I try to be a role model to those kids because I was a fool. So when we're talking about all that violence I did, I was a fool, I was an idiot, I was a sucker, I'll use those words. They're trying to say like you're glorifying. I'm just saying I was real. These guys were fake. But if I was in some of these other neighborhoods, and not that I'm blaming it because I don't lie, I like to shoulder what I did for myself. But yeah, some of these kids, these other kids, they get a little shot at a different life if they look at something and see it through a different lens. Because unfortunately, this is why I don't like what the government does, because they're putting these kids back against the wall in different ways, and they're maneuvering no different than I grew up in the mob. They're working with intimidation. They're working by separating. They're working by fear, whether it's an illness, whether it's a war, and they're doing things to structure for these kids to lose. But then they're given the impression that they're not, but they are, because they're trying to cause division. And I try to unite them. And I want them to know, don't be me, don't be a sucker, because you can't win. Even before I couldn't win, and now I can't win. I can't shut up all these imbeciles that talk like this. This is not important what happened back then. I'm this guy now. I'm the guy that goes out and tries to save a kid's life here and there. It doesn't matter what I did anymore. My life's finished as far as that. But hopefully we can save the next kid from doing it.
And you're a big advocate for the youth, and more specifically the inner city, the underprivileged youth that might think the neighborhood boss is cool and that path just. But could you have reached yourself? Could this John Alite have reached your 19-year-old Jay Light, or would that guy tell him to fuck off?
You know, when you're embedded in that life day and night, I was telling a lot of guys to fuck off. They just didn't catch me right. Maybe I got stabbed up bad. I was in the hospital, in and out for a year. You know, I got battered another time. I got caught short and I got shot. That's part of our life. But some of my friends, they weren't as lucky as me. They got killed. I mean, not some, tons of them. And that's where the nickname came, Death Haven, you know, from losing all our friends.
Right. I noticed, John, you've got a big kind of scar right on your lower lip. You looks like you've been just bat so many times. How'd you get this one right here?
I went through a window. I got about 60-something stitches. I got my teeth knocked out another time in the street and in prison in Brazil from a guard with a shotgun. I got scars all over my body, stomach, my neck, my hip, my leg. It's part of the life, unfortunately. It's just a bad life.
Besides the physical scars, tell us a little bit about the PTSD, the mental scarring you have. Do you have sleepless nights? Do you wake up with nightmares from all this shit?
Everybody knows I don't sleep. I don't have nightmares, but I don't sleep. My mind's constantly racing. And these guys that try to agitate me, I think they want a reaction. But the reaction is, they're too stupid to know what the reaction is. You know, you can't teach somebody something they don't know. And this is why I don't respect Sammy, because he's playing this fake role like you're on TV and it's a movie. And he's trying to con these kids that he's this badass, but he's not. And that's the point why people say, why don't you really like this guy? Because he won't help any kids. It's always about him, because without this little life of his, he has nothing else. He could never exist anywhere else. He doesn't have the ability. You've got to remember the minds are small. They live in a little neighborhood. They go on vacation upstate somewhere. They go to Florida, and they think they live the world. You got to imagine the mentality. And most of these guys never made 2 cents. They don't know what it is to own houses everywhere, estates, businesses. They're not sharp guys. If you're sharp, you'd know the world, you'd travel the world, you'd want to research the world. These guys are just not capable, and they're not capable to help that next kid. They're too selfish about themselves.
Right. No, it's a shame you and Gravano couldn't work together to help children. You know, you guys could be a powerful voice together. You know, another rival you bring up quite often is John Jr., John Gotti Jr. What would the interaction be if you guys were walking down the street and you saw each other? Would it be violent?
These guys are all living a lie. I moved on with my life. The problem is they can't live with themselves, so they take their anger towards me because they don't have anything that's good in their life. Because if you're doing something positive, you don't do something negative. I don't have time to wake up in the morning and go write somebody on a computer like a child and try to, under fake names. These people have no lives. Look where I've traveled the last couple of weeks alone. Yeah. I'm here in California. I was in Mar-a-Lago. I'm in with some really serious people, good people, people that are doing positive things in this world, people that are trying to help, people that are suffering around the world. That's where my life's at. It's not about these guys and what I could do to them. I know what I could do to them back then and what I could do to them today. So, you know, you got very insecure guys that want to, since I'm the guy, when you're the guy and you're on the mountain, everybody wants to knock you off it. The difference is I don't care about that mountain anymore. I care about saving that kid's life down the block.
Right, and I know that to be true, and you know, you've got a packed schedule here in LA, man, and you're really moving around and doing the advocacy work, but you're also telling your story, sharing your story. Is there any way we could do a sit down with you and John Jr. and just a mano a mano, no violence, no insults, and just say, hey, listen, you know, that life is behind us now. Let's do something collectively for the betterment of society.
I've tried. If people see me, I've reached out several times, And I didn't, you know, and I said I won't even mention this family's name for a year about anything, not for the good or the bad. And I've done that, and they continue. So when people are sitting swarming in shit, and that's where they want to stay, in a cesspool, because they don't have anything. Again, if you have anything, you would reach out and do something positive. I tried this. But, you know, and I'm not doing it because I really care to have a conversation with the guy. But I would do it for the next kid that's watching me and said, if you can do it and you can change that much, then maybe I could change.
It would be a huge hatchet to bury, man. It would be a
I don't
game
really
changer.
I don't really have a hatchet with him. I really don't. I mean, listen, I understand why he went in. Every one of his friends started flipping on him. He couldn't take the pressure, whatever, and he flipped. I mean, I don't hold, you know, but the problem is this is all they have. They'll knock something, but that's all they want to live by. You know, they'll just constantly live off that nonsense, and because they don't move into something positive. When you go into something positive, you don't have time for the bullshit. That's bullshit stuff. That's a shitty life in every aspect of it. For his poor father, the way he died, and people want to say, you call him poor father, look how many people he killed. Yeah, I mean, he's no angel, he was no angel, he had a rough life, but at the end of the day, they're all suffering, all of us.
The world's changed. That era, you were, you know, kind of the, you know, you were the last of that era, you know, that cut off, and it's over, man. And it's over in a good way, because there's a new gangster in town. His name is Vladimir Putin. He's the biggest godfather in the world. Tell me about this whole Ukraine thing, man, and this invasion. Is it a bad chess move by Putin, or is he a very well calculated KGB guy?
I think Putin's a very intelligent, strong man that only respects strong people. And I don't know what the news is, because the news lied to us so often now. Who knows what's really accurate here, what's really going on with Russia and Ukraine? Because you have people like Pelosi's son, who's involved with Ukraine, on their board. You have John Kerry's son, who's involved with that board. You have the media telling us that it wasn't riots and it wasn't violent during the BLM burning downs and attacks on our police and on this nation, on this country. They were okay with all this violence, and completely lied to us and to other countries. So the respect level for our country from Putin and other strong leaders is just that. There's no trust. So what they're saying about Putin, they said a lot of things about President Trump. He was our president. You knocked him from pillar to post. And with things that weren't true, like the Russia collusion. This stuff is such lies. How do we know what's accurate now with Putin? Because they lost their credibility. They lost their credibility in the medical field. They lost their credibility in science. They lost the credibility with what people believe now, because now no one trusts anything. It's like a child. When they go to school, you tell them, if you see a policeman wearing a uniform, you don't trust him. Question everything. Now we have the whole country questioning everything because of the actions of these reporters that are working basically for a wing of the government. And I'm not talking about Democrat or Republican, by the way. Because Democrat, I think all of us are kind of middle of the road Democrat. You know, we're not far right, we're not, but our Democratic Party isn't the old Democratic Party. People are missing this. They're all the way to the left, to communism and socialism and Marxism. And that's why you have guys like Bill Maher that I have such respect for. I've been talking about, because he said, this is not the Democratic Party I signed up for years ago. It's not. So when people are looking at you saying, this is about ruining this country in another direction, and that's why our gas prices are incredible, because they don't care about the inner city kids. Right. That's why inflation, they don't care about them. So when you have these con artists in our government that don't get prosecuted, like they prosecute the kids from my neighborhood, I got to speak up.
John, explain to me why you and a lot of mob guys seem to swing kind of almost conservative Republican and are pro-law enforcement. It's kind of an irony that you would be a pro-law enforcement guy.
Because those uniforms they put on every day to risk their lives. You know, and when they put on a uniform to risk their lives for your mother or my mother or somebody's grandmother, they're risking their lives, and to be attacked as if they're criminals. They're not criminals. There's always an element of every organization, whether it's the mob, whether it's the police, whether it's politicians. Actually, the politicians are worse than anybody now. They're getting away with it because they're not being prosecuted. And that's where the country's losing its grip, and people are not respecting us anymore because of what's going on. They just gave themselves a 21% increase in pay. 21%. Well, the inflation, families are starving. You got people living on the street, 500,000 of them living on the street.
Yeah,
So
we gotta. Yeah.
the problem is this.
When you were ripping and riding out there and running and gunning, did you still have respect for federal agents and law enforcement, or did you look at them as the enemy?
I always had respect for them. I don't think I ever disrespect. I mean, I had some fights with some bad cops. I got hurt. But overall, I always respected them. I didn't have the attitude of most of these other guys had. I had the attitude is, you're on that side, your job is to lock me up. You could be a great guy. And I'm a scumbag back then. So they're in the right. I'm in the wrong. I got to be man enough to say, at this point in my life, I'm not that 25-year-old gangster anymore. I'm that guy that's advocating to save lives. So I'm the guy that's saying, when you put on a uniform and you go out during the so-called pandemic, and you're a first responder, you're a fireman, you're a police officer willing to risk your life, you should be respected for it. It's just like our armed services. They're out there risking their lives in these countries around the world. I don't believe our men should be going near Ukraine. Right. That's not a free society. They're not a democratic society. They're their own nation. They didn't want to be involved with us with NATO. So they had their choice in the direction they went. And as strong as Zelensky is, right, he still locked up his opposition. He still closed down 3 news outlets because they were against him. That doesn't sound like democracy to me. So, there's things that people really not really looking at the full picture.
Right. And it's tough to get, like you said, just apolitical, non-op-ed news, just the raw news. Everything has a propaganda tie into it. You don't know what's real anymore.
Well, I think that's the reason why you say gangsters, we love America. As many gangsters as you could say, Luciano back in the day, he tried to help with the war. You love this country. I don't know a country, people always complain, well, go find that country that you don't like, that you like better than here, because you're here. LeBron James, I bring him up a lot. Joy Reid, the newswoman, went to Harvard, and she's filthy rich, and she's always causing division. If you don't like this country, well, you're making millions off this country. So I don't think you had bad luck here. And you went to Harvard, so you got treated pretty good. Sound like privilege to me. But if you don't like it, go live in one of those other countries. But if you're flying Ukraine's flag in the United States now, it's being lifted up in different states. It was just up in Texas. How about lifting up the American flag, putting your hand on your heart? My friends were veterans that risked their lives for this country. So, I think that a lot of people just forget that we're lucky to have a free society, and it's slowly going away. And so I think we need to worry about us first, and I do feel terrible for the families and the kids and the war on both sides, for the Russian or for the Ukrainian.
So, John, a lot of good men are spending their life living in a room the size of a bathroom. They're in the penitentiaries, jail systems, because they snapped and their temper got the best of them. And I know as an Albanian, you have a very strong temper. How do you curtail and talk yourself out? If someone cuts you off now, are you going to freak out, or how do you keep yourself composed?
I learned over the years now through therapy, through different things and people helping me. There's a difference between ego and pride. So the ego is what made me go hurt a lot of guys. And now I learned to shut that down, look in the mirror and say, I like myself more than I want to hurt this guy or butcher this guy or kill this guy. I still have the same thought process, I just don't do it. I don't react. The pride part is, I pride myself on being a different human being now. Somebody over the last decade and a half is somebody that is able to walk away, be proud of myself, and say that I can help this next person to better their life. So I contribute to society. Before, 15 or 20 years ago, I was just a guy that's a menace to society, where I was the guy that you're not proud of. You're a guy that you're ashamed of your past, you can't change it, but you use it as a positive now to move forward and try to help the next kid not to go into those same pitfalls that I did.
Right. So you changed your belief system. What used to be a moment that would make you snap, you now walk yourself down and go, I have too much pride to lose my cool.
And I have too much pride to lose my cool. I have a better life. I have a direction I want to leave my legacy to, and that's helping people. And I look at these weak people that talk like this or try to threaten me because they would never do it in the past, and I know that. And I got to laugh at them and say they're doing it because they know they're going to get away with it now, because I'm not going to react like before. I'm not going to come kick their door in. I'm not going to walk in a restaurant and hurt them And I know that they're not about that because, like I said, I grew up with most of these guys. I know them from the past. I know what they're about. And they can lie to those kids to make themselves feel good because it's a false sense of, I don't know what it is, what they're trying to do. I just know where my pride is now.
Right. It took them to get into their 50s to be tough. But
Yeah.
where were they back in the 20s and 30s, you know? But we all know that story. But, you know, you're really different than a lot of mob guys because you actually really went international. And your book, Mafia International, really highlights a lot of those journeys and trips. And it's a must-read book. How's it doing? How's it doing on sales?
It's doing good, and it's a book that I took perspectives of people, other bosses around other countries that contributed chapters in the book about themselves, about me. I took black community people that were good friends of mine. There were street guys that also contributed. I took a guy that's father was one of the bosses in Philadelphia. He contributed a couple of chapters. So I got different perspectives of people that talk about myself, themselves, and the perspective of the mob in this country and out of the country.
Yeah, and John, one thing I appreciate about you as well is you will, if a young troubled teen reaches out to you, you will respond to that teen. You'll take time out of your busy schedule to speak into that kid. How can a troubled person reach out to you right now, or a mother of a single mom who can't, you know, tame her little lion? How can they reach out to you, John?
I got a website, johnalite.com. I have my Instagram, True John Alite, and I have I'm very on social media, Facebook, Reddit. I'm all over, LinkedIn. So I'm out there. I'm easy to get a hold of, and I really enjoy helping these kids. So if a parent needs help, they reach out, and honestly, I built up a base of people that reach out, and they call me, and they give me other people that are in trouble, and I work with organizations in the inner city, so they also send me people.
Yeah, and hopefully you'll be coming back through LA again, and we'll get to see you, John. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me. Thanks.